Okay, grade 10. We have moved into my apartment now. We're no longer at the British University of Vietnam because we've been thrown out, you might say, because of all the worries about the coronavirus. And so, probably quite correctly, the university feels that it is safer to work at home. This is a very short video. This is kind of an in-between video before we move on to the next topic. But I noticed just because there's about 4 or 5 of you who have already done your homework on fiscal policies, that there seems to be a little bit of a confusion, particularly related to the two questions at the end that I want you to think about. And as you should know, if you take out the document that you should have, you will see that the two questions being asked relate to what is the multiplier effect and why should governments ignore it at their peril? Okay, that's a really good question. I actually took that question out of an old Cambridge AS paper. And also, why do Keynesians put such emphasis on fiscal policies to achieve their macroeconomic objective? That's another really good question, and you should think about it. Okay, let's start with the multiplier effect. And I definitely got the impression that some of you, maybe I didn't make it clear, maybe the handout was not very clear. So hopefully I can make it clear now. So the idea is, and it's a fairly logical idea, that if you bring in new money, it has to be new money to an economy, that the final effect, in other words, the influence of that money will be much different than the total sum of that new money. In other words, if you put in, I think I gave the example of your grandmother sending you $100 from outside of Vietnam, the effect of that money on the Vietnamese economy will be approximately 7 times the $100. In other words, it's going to be about $700. And the reason, as I gave it to you, was because the money will be kind of used again and again and again and again. So, when you receive it, you're going to buy something, and the shopkeeper who actually receives your money, they're going to pay the workers, and then the workers are going to pay their electricity bill, and the electricity bill is going to be paying their workers, and eventually it will be used about 7 times until it is withdrawn out of the circular flow. And if you remember the circular flow diagram, it shows that there is money going into the economy and there's also money going out of the economy. And I gave you two examples, excuse me, in the handout, which related to the money being withdrawn or taken out of the economy. And one of them was if it was put into the bank, that would kind of take it away from, at least temporarily, it would take it away from the circulation of money in the economy. And also, if you bought an import like a Mercedes Benz from Germany, that money had to leave the country. And therefore that would be withdrawn as well. So what it's saying is that the effect of that $100 is a lot more than the $100. Now, why is that important? Why is that important? Because clearly you could really mess up the economy big time if you were, let's say, the Minister of Finance. So let's just say, you're the Prime Minister of Vietnam, and you say to your Minister of Finance, we got to do something about inflation there, because inflation is getting way out of control, and we're losing support, and therefore we need to do something. What do you think, Mr. Minister of Finance or Mrs. Minister of Finance, what should we do? And the bottom line is that the the Minister of Finance will probably ask his Department of Statistics to come up with a good answer. Okay, and so the Department of Statistics is going to come up with this idea that, let's say, we need to withdraw, take out of the economy, let's say about $1 billion through their calculations, and they do it through something called econometrics, which is mathematical modeling for the purpose of prediction. They actually have calculated that they need to withdraw, take out $1 billion out of the Vietnamese economy in order for inflation to somehow be under control. Because let's just say that the government believes that there's too much money chasing too few goods, and therefore we're going to take some money out of the economy to stabilize inflation. So the Minister of Finance passes that on to the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister says, oh, that's a good idea. So I'm going to do something like raising taxes, let's say, which will be the equivalent of raising $1 billion, which will take that money out of the circulation, of the people. And by doing so, you think that inflation will actually be solved. But because you did not include the multiplier effect, that any change will have, a different level of impact on the economy, it means that you could drastically, reduce the amount of money in circulation, not by 1 billion, which was the desired amount, but by 7 billion. And that would be the difference between doing a good job and totally messing up the economy, where you have dried up the liquidity, the amount of cash in the economy, and suddenly there's just no money in the economy, and people start getting unemployed, and there's a recession or a depression, probably a recession, which is a period of 2 financial quarters, in other words, 6 months, where there is zero or negative economic growth. So you're going to slow down the economy so much that there would be, dramatic, recession. There might be poverty, and people want to cut off your head for ruining the economy. So what do the government do? They say, oh, okay, well, we need to include the multiplier effect, and therefore, rather than removing $1 billion, it would be $1 billion divided by about 1.4, I think it is, which would, be the equivalent of accepting that 7 is the multiplier effect. Now, a good question might be, how are you absolutely certain that the multiplier effect is 7? And I don't know that answer. Okay, that's a good question. And they have their formulas where they sit down with computers, etc., and they try to work out to what extent that people will, the speed at which money circulates. And I suspect, I'm not certain about this, but I suspect that in Vietnam, that money circulates really, really quickly. That you'll find that lower income people will tend to spend money really, really quickly, which would mean that the circulation of money actually happens, within days of receiving the money. Okay, and that is what we call the um, that is when you have a situation where Bill Gates, he would not even bother to sort of bend over to pick up $100, but any low income person, the moment they got $100, they would spend it right away. Okay, and so the marginal propensity to consume, we call that, which is the rate at which you spend money quick. Okay, and so in a relatively low income economy, and I don't even think that Vietnam qualifies for that anymore, because it's considered officially by the World Bank as a tiger economy, and it's no longer seen as a third world country. But certainly probably compared to Canada, you would find that people would be spending that money much quicker. Okay, and that means that the multiplier effect might be even 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You know, it might circulate 12 times before that money actually is withdrawn out of the economy. Okay, so to answer my own question, it would mean that, why is this important? Well, it's important to be precise and accurate when you make policy decisions. If you want to withdraw money out or you want to add money back into the economy, you don't want to mess things up. In other words, if you're trying to get the economy moving and therefore you want to bring more money into the economy, into the circular flow, you want to put cash into the hands of people, you don't want to put so much money into the hands of people that suddenly this causes inflation and it's called an overheated economy. You don't want that. People will criticize you for that. You try to solve, an equilibrium problem like this. There's not enough money in circulation, so you want to get the economy moving. Maybe there's unemployment, et cetera, et cetera. So you try to get money into the hands of people to increase spending, thereby raising the gross domestic product. And what happens is that you overdo it and you suddenly flood the market with money, and this will, destabilize the economy in the other way. Just like the example I gave you in the beginning, where if you felt that there was too much inflation and there was too much money circulating in the economy, you might want to take a little bit of money out to get a desired effect, a desired objective. But obviously, if you're not taking account of the multiplier, then you're going to find that you've taken too much money out and you're going to crash the economy. People will lose their jobs. There won't be any money in circulation, and you will be blamed. And they're going to cut your head off again. So for that reason, governments, whether it's Canada or Vietnam or anywhere else in the world, they need to take into consideration the multiplier effect. Okay, the question number 2, I thought was quite an easy question, but I got a number of people writing to me saying, I don't understand the question and it's too difficult. What is this about the Keynesians and the fiscal policy? Okay, well, I've told you at least 30 times that Keynesians just love fiscal policies, okay? They're obsessed with it. They somehow feel that fiscal policies will be the main catalyst, in other words, the main stimulant for economic growth. And so it says, why do Keynesians put such emphasis on fiscal policies to achieve their macroeconomic objectives? Well, it's because they believe that through taxing and spending, particularly the spending bit, that they can actually get the economy moving. Now, the taxing bit, they believe in the progressive taxation, which promotes a certain amount of equity in society. That's a little bit different, but it doesn't necessarily stimulate economic growth, but it's another one of the objectives of Keynesians is to create a more equitable society. And that clearly they believe in fiscal policies because they believe that through spending their money in a careful way, in other words, putting money into the hands of low-income people through, let's say, public works projects, things like roads or airports or sewage systems or something like that, that you can get money into the hands of the construction workers who will, because of their high marginal propensity to consume, they're going to rush out, spend that money. That will put more money into the circular flow. And we know that 70% of GDP, which is a measurement of wealth in society, is made up of consumption. So in other words, the Keynesians believe, and I'm not too convinced of this argument myself, but that's what the Keynesians believe, and I'm a little bit of a half Keynesian myself, but that we're supposed to believe that through spending, that somehow the world becomes a better place. And of course, from an environmental perspective, that is a total disaster, because if all you do is get people to go out and borrow more money or use their credit cards more or do everything you can to get people to spend, and then you, at least in the short run, have an increase in the GDP, what are you doing to the climate? And what are you doing to the environment? And what are you doing to the world? You're just being very wasteful, and why do we need to have three toasters rather than one? But a Keynesian would love everybody to have a toaster in every room so that you can go out and spend, and through spending you're hiring more people, and you're making the economy better, and the measurement of wealth is going up, et cetera, et cetera. So there's lots of criticisms in that argument, but that's what the Keynesians believe. They're big believers in consumption. They believe that through consumption, the economy will grow and everybody will be better off. Okay, so that's my reflections on those two questions. So get to work, because I noticed there's only 5 people in the class, and I think we've got 21 students in the class. There's only 5 students by today, which is Tuesday, I think it is, Tuesday, which in fact have finished their homework, okay, which is not okay, okay? So I want that homework done, okay? So stay safe, okay? Put on your mask, be careful, keep your distance from your neighbor, don't get too friendly, okay? Stay inside. You need to incubate yourself a little bit, make sure that you are not contaminating anybody else. We're pretty lucky here in Vietnam because people in Europe are dropping dead right, left, and center, and in Vietnam, to my knowledge, I don't think anybody has died. So this is a huge, huge credit to the Vietnamese government that they jumped on this from the very beginning, and that we are all relatively safe. So I want Vietnam to stay safe, and I want you to stay safe. And so I'm going to speak to you by the end of this week. Bye bye for now. Bye bye.